Hi guys, this is Pankaj Dubey, and in this session we are going to talk about software testing. We'll see that what is software testing, the types of software testing, what is STLC, how to design test cases, how to write test scripts, and what are the automation tool, and many more things. So basically this will be very helpful for all those who are going to begin their career in software testing. And this tutorial is basically focusing on the manual testing quite much, which is the core area of testing, and later on the further video I'll explain what is automation testing and the tools and the basic of all the tools. Okay, so let's go ahead. So what we'll cover in this video is what is software testing and why do we need it, what is SDLC, which stands for software development life cycle, and SDLC models. What is STLC, software testing life cycle? What's the difference between quality assurance, quality control, and testing? Software testing types and correlation between SDLC and STLC. A basic of automation testing, a basic of continuous integration testing architecture, and a workflow, a sample workflow, and Q&A. Okay, so what is software testing? Testing is basically an intentional approach of doing an activity on any given product to find and detect errors and establishing a confidence that the product is bug free, okay, before going in market. So basically it's a process of doing an activity to find the bugs in a given product, like any software, website, CRM, CMS, anything. Okay, and why it's needed? It's needed because mainly its need is to make sure that we don't lose money, we don't lose our time, we don't lose our business reputation. But if you want to go in depth, then you can read this, or I'll just explain it. Why it's needed is because you can figure it out. You can figure out field validation issues, sites responsiveness issues, payment related issues, security issues, confusing navigation, inadequate insight search, verifying store policies and customer support for any e-commerce product, site standards as per industry norms like copyright messages, and there are other things, lack of device and browser compatibility to perform the compatibility testing. So what is this? I'm sorry. So field validation issues, something like you're registering yourself, you're signing up on any website, and in the age column you are putting the value 200 something, and you're putting integer values in the name field. So this is something that your form should detect at the remote level, at the client level, which is called field validation issues. Site responsiveness under specific load. How does your site behaves when traffic comes huge traffic comes on a website? Payment related issues, security issues, confusing navigation, inadequate insight search. They are functions of searching a product on a website. So maybe that the search function is not working as it is expected to work. Next is verifying store policies and customer support. It's specifically about e-commerce website to verify the policies, like what is your return policy if you're selling anything, what is your exchange policy, these type of things. Site standard as per industry norms like copyright message, and there are the things which comes under the different levels. So maybe that your site is following a particular standard, but actually it doesn't, the coders haven't implemented that standard. So, and lack of device and browser compatibility. Suppose your website's responsiveness is not good and it doesn't work properly on mobile phone browsers and on any like Mac browser, Safari browser. So in that case we can figure it out being a tester. Okay, what is QA, QC, and testing? It is a more confusing term because in the IT world, mainly you'll see that everyone talking about QA, that's it. So they think that actually QC and testing comes under QA, which is not correct, which is not fairly fair. So I'll explain what's the difference between QC, QA, and testing. So first, let's go to QA. QA is also called a verification process. So during the development process, performing an activity to make sure that your product will be a bug-free product. Okay, while it's that's sure that you cannot ensure that your product will be 100% bug-free, but actually it's a process of monitoring and improving the software development process. Okay, so that the more errors can be eliminated at the beginning level, at the early level. Okay, and now what's QC? QC is a defect detection and validation activity. So suppose your product has been made and now you are sending this product to testers. So now what they'll do, actually the coding has been done, the product is ready. So before releasing the product in market, what they do, they perform different types of activity to validate your actual product with expected standards and expected benchmarks. And to do so, a testing is an activity. Okay, so actually testing is part of QC, and testing includes activities that ensure the identification of bugs, errors, defects in a software. So what is this? I'll explain it again. What is QA? QA is a verification process during the SDLC phase. It's a monitoring and improving the SDLC process. And SQC is to validate the product once the code has been done, and testing is a process of finding bugs and errors. Okay, so I'll explain it in much better way in further slide here, when I'll explain you the software testing types. Now, what is SDLC? SDLC stands for Software Development Life Cycle. A software development life cycle is essentially a series of steps or phases that provides a model for the development and life cycle management of an application or pieces of software. Okay, so the different phases that comes under the software development life cycle, that comes under the journey of making a software, is called SDLC. So SDLC steps begin with requirement analysis. Once a client or stakeholder comes to any IT company or the business analyst person, then he gives you the requirement, a raw requirement, and then BA person performs a requirement analysis and prepares a SRS document. SRS stands for Software Requirement Specification, and people call it different. People use different words for SRS, like BRD. And if you're working in a different methodology, then CR is also a term. So CR stands for change request, BRD stands for a business requirement document, and SRS stands for software requirement specification. So this is the first step of SDLC, and next is project planning. So planning includes the modeling, what model you're going to follow, what is the diagram, what is the workflow of your application. Such type of things will be included in project design. So I missed project planning. Project planning is something like what is the budget of the project, and how much resources do we have, what are the risks that that can occur during the SDLC phases. So these things will be planned in the project planning session, in the project planning phase. And project designing includes the preparation of a flow chart, that how your system requirement will flow, how the system and branches will be interacted with each other. And after that, the requirement will be broken into several small pieces, and each piece will go to the development phase, and the developers will develop that piece of requirement. Okay, and they'll integrate it, and they'll create after integrating, they'll make a whole system. And now a tester's requirement begins in testing phase. So after the development is done, it goes into the testing phase, and now SDLC is a different step for the testing thing. So that will be covered further, but here we are saying only SDLC. So after development, testing phase comes, and then the implementation is like the deployment of that software in the real time. And once it works fine, then maintenance will come into picture. Okay, so these are the phases of SDLC, and now we'll see what is SDLC model. So waterfall model is very old and ancient development model, and it's basically a sequential model. So what is sequential? That I told you here that it's a sequence. First requirement analysis will happen, then project planning, then project designing, then development, testing, implementation, maintenance. So it's a sequence one by one. So once you have passed the one sequence, like if you have passed this requirement analysis and you have started working on project planning, then in waterfall model you cannot go back and you cannot make any changes if requirement changes further. Okay, so this applies on all the phases. Like if you have started development and any further requirement occurs, then in the near time you cannot implement that in the current release or in the current development cycle. You cannot implement the newly introduced functions or features. So this is a limitation of waterfall model, but actually it's very ancient and the very first model of SDLC. So nowadays, till nowadays, there are so many companies who uses waterfall model. And then spiral model, prototype model, agile model, V model, W model. So basically there are many companies who are working on the especially on V model, either W model or agile model. So we'll explain all this. There will be a separate video for agile methodologies and agile, how to work in agile model, and V and W model I'll explain in further slide. Agile is basically a part of spiral model. So once I'll explain agile model, it will also cover this spiral model. And prototype model is nothing but a different or customized model, and we use it as a blueprint. Okay, so let's go to the further slide. Okay, here is a V model and W model, and it will explain you the correlation between development and testing life cycle. So what is V model? V model will just go to this image. It will explain you. It's in shape of V. So here it begins. So the first phase is requirement analysis. Once the requirement has been gathered, and the business analyst or the any person designated for that thing performs the requirement analysis, and at the same time that person plans for the UAT, user acceptance testing, or product acceptance testing. So it's just planning. The SDLC thing is a plan, and actually the execution is of this phase, which is on the left side of this V symbol. So requirement analysis will happen and UAT will be planned. After the requirement analysis, specification will be executed, specification will be performed, and at that same time system level testing will be planned. For the low level designing, like after making the flow chart in a specification level, it will be break down into the several small pieces. Okay, and which will be called low level design. And at the time of low level design, integration testing will be planned, because once you break the requirement into pieces, later you will have to merge those pieces. Okay, so once you merge those pieces, once you integrate those pieces, then at the same time we will have to perform integration testing. And after breaking the requirement into pieces, small pieces, it will be assigned to the coder, and coder will start their coding. And at the time of coding, for each separate piece of code, a unit test will be performed. Okay, so once you're done with the coding, you'll perform unit testing. Basically it's a part of white box tester. So anyone who is performing their code, who is writing their code, will be the only one who will perform their unit testing. So it's an interview question too, that who performs unit testing, whether it's the same coder who has coded that area or any other. So the answer would be the person who has coded that piece of requirement will be the one who will perform the unit testing. Okay, so you can see here that at all the phases which is mentioned on the left side of SDLC, it's an execution phase, and all the requirements, all the phases which is mentioned at the right side of this shape will be planned at the time of these requirements. Like at the time of requirement specification, requirement analysis, UAT will be planned. At the time of specification, system testing will be planned. And later, once and the requirement and the flow will be going through like this. The execution flow will be something like requirement analysis first, and then specification, and then low level designing, and then coding, then unit testing will be performed, then integration testing will be performed, then system testing will be performed, and then product acceptance testing or UAT will be performed. So this is the flow. Okay, and this was the exactly in vModel. vModel is the most used software development model in companies, where we plan about testing the same time of system development. So what we are going to do here, we are planning about testing at the same time of software development. Okay, and now let's see wModel. So what's the difference between wModel? Here you can see that all the STLC thing is being planned, okay, once the coding is done. Okay, there is nothing happening before before there is no testing activity happening before this coding thing. Okay, so all these requirements are untouched from a tester's point of view. So there may be some flaws in the specification or designing time, and which will lead a detection of bug in the later stages. So what we are going to do in wModel, we are going to implement a different phase, a different V, which will be starting, just follow the cursor, which will be starting something like this. Okay, and it creates a wModel. So it's a V and again a V. So you might have heard about V&V process in big IT companies. So V&V is nothing but verification and validation. Okay, so here what's happening at the time of requirement, which was the requirement analysis. At the time of requirement, we are testing that requirement document, and we are making sure that there is no ambiguity between the requirement, there is no flaw in the requirement, or there is all the requirements are realistic, so that it may not lead to any further detection or bug creation, something. Okay, and next level is specification. So QA person will test that specification document or that designing document on the further level, and coder will perform their unit testing. Okay, and once software is built, the tester will perform integration testing. Build system will be performed by developer, and system test will be performed. Installation testing, installation system, and UAT will be performed. So what's happening here, we are implementing a process of QA for each level of SDLC phases, and at the same time of STLC phases. So STLC is nothing but the execution, which is validation part. And if you talk about this activities, test requirement checking, test specification checking, test designing checking, so all these are QA parts. So earlier we have talked about what is SQA and QC. Okay, so if we talk about QA, then it is implemented there, and in vModel only QC is implemented there. Okay, so here it's just QC part, but here in this phase of wModel, in the model of W, here we are implementing SQA as well. Okay, let's go to next slide. Now we come to the point, what is software testing lifecycle. So as we have talked earlier, what is software testing, here we'll talk about STLC phases and steps. So it begins with the very first SRS, BRD, and CR review. So SRS is what stands for is software requirement specification, BRD stands for business requirement document, and CR stands for change request. Okay, so a tester or anyone who is responsible for test planning, they'll review the document, the requirement document or change request document, and after reading that or after having a proper understanding, they'll start test planning. And in the test planning, the model will be decided, the budget, the risk, and all these things will be planned at the test planning thing. Who is the leader, what is the timeline, what is the entry criteria, what is the exit criteria, what is the requirement traceability matrix, who is the owner, and in what cases the requirement will be moved to further release. All these things will be planned in a test planning document or in test planning phase. Okay, and next it comes a test designing. So what is test designing now? So to explain it, I'll try explaining it with Paint, because actually it's a long process of test designing. So what happens in test design phase, a person creates a scenario like you are going to test a website. Okay, so you're going to test a website and first page is login page. Okay, so the scenario will be something like uh, perform user login test. Okay, I'll write it down in MS Excel so that you can have a better understanding, and we'll need MS Excel because we have to see that what is test scripting as well. My system is a bit slow. Okay, till the time we'll see here. So what we're going to do is we are going to see that what is test designing. Okay, so in test designing thing, I guess it won't be helpful. Better open Notepad. So in test designing part, what we are going to do is write the test scenarios. What is test scenario? For example, we are taking an example of web login page. Okay, so the scenario will be something like test a login page. Actually, it's a use case thing. So based on the use case, we design the test cases. But here what we are going to do is we are reading the test document here. Okay, and after reading the test document, we are going to create a we are going in the test designing phase. And what exactly it happens there in test designing phase, we write the test scenarios. Test scenario is like an overall thing that what you're going to perform, what you're going to make sure that it is a bug free requirement. Okay, so in test designing phase, first thing will be write the test scenarios. Okay, so to make for making sure that the login page is bug free, you will have to perform multiple you have to check multiple things. Okay, and for that thing you will what you will do, you will write test cases. Okay, so first you have to design first you have to write the test scenarios, and then you will have to create test cases. So what are the test cases that you can write for a login page? You can write some test cases, something like enter user ID and leave password section blank and hit enter. What you have to validate? The error message. Okay, so error message will be defined in the requirement document, that what should be the error message once a user enters their user ID and he leaves the password section completely blank and click on submit button. Then what should happen? So you can validate that that error message. And in the other thing, what you can do is you can just enter leave user ID blank and enter password and click on submit button. Okay, and again here what you will be doing is you will be validating the user ID and error message. Okay, so what we are seeing here is in test designing phase, what you do is you create the test scenarios. Test scenario is a scenario that will be created by a tester. Like if you are visiting a website, then you have to test login page. So testing the login page will be called as your test scenario. And to in order to achieve this test scenario pass, you will have to create multiple test cases. Like you have to first enter the user ID and leave the password section blank and hit enter and validate the error message. This is the one test case. Second test case could be something like enter user ID and password both in capitals and see and validate the error message. So these are such things that will be written as a test case in order to make sure that your test scenario is passed. So once you design the test case, you will have to write the test scripts. Okay, so what is test script? Test script is nothing but a procedural way of achieving or performing an activity, to execute a test case. So I'll explain in Excel sheet. So suppose there is a requirement that comes to you. Okay, so what you do, first you write the test scenario, and scenario is something like test login page. Okay, so this is the scenario. I'll scenario is test login page. And what test cases did you write for us? Test case 1, enter user ID, and leave password section blank, and leave password section blank, and validate the error message. So this is one test case. Okay, second test case could be something like enter the user ID in capitals and enter the password in capitals and validate the error message. So these are something which is test case, which will be called as test case. Okay, so now the process of writing test scripting will come into picture. So what is test scripting? This is a format of test scripting. So what you'll be doing is you'll be following a format of writing test scripting. So this may be your company specific. You'll find your own format there. Okay, so format will be something like what is the test case name. So test case name is suppose test case this. Objective is the objective. What is the objective performing that test case? What you will be checking during that test case? What are the prerequisites? Like what are the things that you need to have before in order to start your test execution? And what are the steps? And what is the expected and actual result? Okay, so expected result you will be writing at the time of scripting, and actual result you will be filling out once you are executing your test case. So this is all. That's all you will be doing under the test designing phase. Give me a sec, please. Yeah. Okay, so once you're done with the test designing, then test environment setup will come into picture, and there may be that there is a different team who supplies the test environment setup, or in other case the developers will be the one who will give you the test environment. Test environment is nothing but a dummy environment where the new functions and features will be implemented, and you'll be testing it. Okay, and next phase of test execution. So during test execution you will be executing all those test cases that you have written during the test designing phase. Next is defect tracing, tracking and management. So there are multiple tools available in market like Bugzilla, Jira, Mantis, HPQC. So these are the some tools that you can use in to manage your bugs and defects. Next is test reporting. So in test reporting there will be multiple things which will be created and signed by the test leads or the test manager. So it will contain that how many bugs did you raise, how many test cases did you write there, and how many of them passed, and reason of no run, on reason of blockers. So these are some things that will be mentioned there in test reporting documents, and this is the last document that will be supplied as part of STLC phase. Okay, so you can again have a look of the cycle. It again explains you in a cycle way that what are the phases. So first requirement analysis and then test planning. What we did in test planning, we created a document which explains the timeline, which explains the owner of that product, and which explains the budget, timelines, in case if there is any assumption criteria, what is the entry criteria, what is the exit criteria, what is the passing requirement. All these things will be mentioned in test planning document. Next is test designing that I said here, but here it explains that test case development overall, and then test execution, then test result reporting, defect tracing and management, regression testing, test closure. So regression testing is something that we have missed so far, but we'll be covering in next slide. Okay, so let's go to there. Types of software testing. So if someone like majorly if you ask anyone that how many types of testing is there, so generally one answer come, and it is black box and white box, which is not fairly true, because there are different types of testing apart from black and white box. So what we are going to do here, we are going to see that how many testing type is there and what testing types shall we implement in a process. Okay, so here it says that there are two types of testing: static testing and dynamic testing. So you remember earlier in slide I explained you that what is QC and what is QA. So QA is static testing and QC is dynamic testing. Okay, so what is QA? QA is a process of monitoring and improving your software development process in order to eliminate the errors and flaws in beginning levels of SDLC. So what does it mean? It means that validating and checking the documents that has created before the coding begins, or even though if the coding begins, then there are also certain ways of performing static testing on the codes of that area. Okay, so let's see how we can achieve it. Okay, so there are some ways of performing static testing, which is a review, walkthrough and inspection. You can review the requirement document. A QA person can review the design document. He can ask the business analyst or anyone to just walk through that document, and he'll make sure that there is no flaw. And a QA person go to any developer and he can inspect the code. Okay, so that's how you can achieve the static testing part. And if you come to dynamic testing, then it is again categorized into functional testing and non-functional testing. So what are those? Functional testing and non-functional testing. Functional testing is something like checking the mentioned behavior or the mentioned requirements, and the SRS and the software requirement specification is delivered and it's working fine. So this area will be covered as part of functional testing. And what we'll cover in non-functional testing, non-functional testing will cover all those aspects of the product which is not covered in the SRS, but actually it is required in order to work on those products smoothly and without any worry. So what does it mean? Let's see it in here. Okay, first let's see this functional testing. So now it categorizes functional testing into two parts. One is white box testing and black box testing. And there is one more part which is called gray box testing, but actually it's not needed. So mainly we'll be covering here white box and black box. So what are those? White box is something which applies on coding level. Okay, so what does it mean, coding level? That here in white box testing, someone will check what are the path coverage, test coverage, code reviews. These all things will be covered as part of white box testing. So if you remember during SDLC phase, I told you that the last part is coding, and each piece of code will be coded by a coder, and the unit testing will only apply on that part of code. That means what unit testing does, unit testing is a part of white box testing. Okay, I'm sorry, the order is a bit inadequate. So here it's explained a non-functional, but we'll come on to that part later. First we are going to see white box testing. So unit testing is a part of white box testing because it applies on the coding level part. So in unit testing, what a tester will perform, a unit tester will see that each unit or each piece of code is working as expected, and it is like expected to do. So how we can achieve unit testing? You can achieve it by code, statement, path coverage, branch coverage and code review thing. Okay, and now majorly a tester perform either black box testing or non-functional testing. Okay, so what black box testing covers is integration testing. Integration testing is something when you integrate two different units of code which is already passed a unit testing. So if you integrate two units or more than two units, then integration testing will be performed, like what are the requirements of flowing data from one unit to another unit. So integration is basically some companies put it into the white box, under white box testing, and some companies put it into black box testing part. So that's why I have kept the back color of this block as purple, because you cannot, it's not that sure that it will come under black box testing only. Okay, so make sure that if you're taking the reference of this presentation, then you make sure that you do not stick on the statement like yes, the integration testing is part of only black box testing. It may come under white box as well. So that is why I have kept the background color of this block as purple. Okay, and rest of the testing part is only part of black box testing, which is in greenish color. Okay, so what are the testing type that comes under black box? It's smoke sanity testing. What is smoke and sanity testing? Smoke and sanity testing is to basically check all the critical part of your website or your product. Like if the product doesn't pass the smoke or sanity test, then the further testing cannot be executed on that product. It will be returned back to the developer, and developer will fix those issues, and then only we'll again perform the smoke and sanity. And if it passes, then we will pass on the further phases of testing, like functional, regression and all. Otherwise it will not be executed. So what is the thing that covers smoke and sanity testing? Smoke testing is nothing but checking the critical functionalities. Okay, so let's take an example. Like there is a website, there is an e-commerce website. Okay, and it comes to you to test the functions of that website. So what you will do, you will first see that user is able to log in. Okay, if user is not able to log in, that means the further test cannot be executed. Okay, there are lots of dependencies there on the login thing. So until unless a user doesn't log in, he won't be able to check the my account page and the many other things. Okay, and in same way, like a user is not able to make any payment. Okay, there are some payment related issues. So if these are the cases, in that case the further level of testing cannot be executed. Okay, so this will be coming under smoke and sanity testing. So there is a difference between smoke and sanity that I'll try to explain you here using MS Paint. So what is smoke testing? Smoke testing is something like once a new product comes in testing domain for a tester, it comes to a tester, and it is actually a new product, and the builds of this product is not established yet. Okay, what not established yet or not stable yet actually. So what does it mean? What is the meaning of not stable? Stable product will only be called when it passes multiple levels of regression test. Like if there is a product which is in very initial stage, okay, and it comes to a tester, then the tester will perform smoke test on that product, because the tester knows that actually it's a new product and it will not be stable yet. Okay, so how tester will make this decision? By knowing that how many suites of regression test cases has been run on that particular product. So suppose if this product passes 10 level of regression test, that means 10 times it has passed regression test cases with more than 99% success rate. That means a tester will consider this product as a stable build, and now the same testing of critical functionalities will be called as sanity test. Okay, so I'll explain it again. So suppose there is a new build, there is a new product which comes to a tester, and tester knows that it is very new product, and for the time being there is only 2 or 3 levels of regression has been executed on that product. Okay, so in that case the tester will consider it as a non-stable product. Okay, and in case of non-stable product, tester will perform smoke testing. And if tester knows that this product has passed 10 or 15 rounds of regression testing with 99% success rate or more than that, in that case it may be considered as a stable product, and now the term of performing critical checks will be called as sanity test. So those are same, but the product is a bit different. So that's the difference between smoke and sanity test. Okay, next is functionality testing. Functionality testing is nothing but the newly implemented features. Like there was an existing product, okay, and there are two requirements that has been added to it. Okay, there were suppose 1 to 10 requirements was already there on that product, and feature A and feature B has been newly implemented. So functionality testing will cover only those newly implemented features, feature A and feature B. So this will be covered under functionality testing. And what regression testing will do? Regression testing will do the testing of those already existed 10 functions. Like I said, in the product 1 to 10 requirements was already there, and requirement 11 and 12 is newly introduced. Okay, so if requirement 11 and 12 is released during the current build, then that requirement will be tested under functionality testing, and all those existing requirements, requirement 1 to 10, will be covered under regression testing. Okay, so in case suppose if any further release comes, like build 3, and in build 3 you will see that requirement 1 to 12 is already existing, and requirement 13 and 14 is newly implemented. So in that case, requirement 13 and 14 will be tested under functionality testing part, and requirement 1 to 12 will be covered as part of regression testing, because requirement 1 to 12 is already existing. And now system testing. Testing the whole system whole and soul will be called as system testing, and UAT is checking the system from an end user's point of view, will be covered as part of UAT. And now let's see what is non-functional testing. So non-functional testing basically covers the performance, security, compatibility. All these things will be covered as part of non-functional testing, because user it's not a requirement, it's not a function, it's a behavior. So behavioral thing will be covered as part of non-functional testing, like load and stress. So what's the difference between load and stress? Load and stress testing are part of performance testing. So load is something like checking your system, that how does it behave in peak orders, in peak time. When traffic comes, a huge traffic comes, then how does your system behaves? Maybe the responsiveness is a bit slow. And what is stress? Stress is checking the breaking point of your system, like putting the load and checking that at this extent your system breaks. Compatibility is checking your system's responsiveness on different browsers and devices. Security is like encryption testing, and the other ways of making sure that securities cannot be breached. Recovery testing is like once your data has been lost, then is there any way of recovering those data? Usability is like finding a usability point of bugs, like if user is has some problem to read anything or to type anything, that will come under usability. And cookies testing will be performed on the basis of session and all. So smoke testing, functionality testing, regression testing, user acceptance testing as are part of functional testing that we covered earlier. Same applies for non-functional performance. I told you there that load and stress are two types of performance testing. Compatibility, user interface testing is usability testing, and localization testing is checking that there are localized thing, like if there is any e-commerce site, and the same content, your site is available for British market and for American market. Okay, and the same product is available for British market and for American market as well. So in that case, localization will be like if you're putting the symbol of currency, then in US market it will be some it should be shown something with dollar, and for British market it should be with pound symbol. Workflow, actually it's a workflow of Agile. So Agile I'll cover in a separate video, so I'll just basically explain it quickly. Sprint start in Agile, what the team does is they fix a sprint for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or 1 week, and they fix the requirement, timeline, and acceptance criteria. For that sprint, code in WIP, test planning in WIP. So until coding part is in WIP, a tester or the test team plans their work, test environment setup, and at the same time tester performs smoke test in progress, function testing WIP, regression testing WIP, and if there was any defect, it will be raised and fixed, and then it will be deployed into the live. Now what is automation? Automation is like implementing a tool to eliminate the manual process So there are different tools which is available in market for different test objectives. So what are the tools and what for the requirements? For functional and regression testing, there are some tool called Selenium, QTP, Water, and Sahi. For performance testing, there are some tools like JMeter, LoadRunner. For bug reporting and tracking, there are tools Bugzilla, Mantis, Jira, Redmine. And test management tools are like HP Quality Center, which is a paid tool of Mercury. Earlier it was developed by Mercury, but later it acquired by HP. So it's a product of HP now. And TestLink. TestLink is an open source, so you can manage your work in TestLink. Know what is continuous integration testing architecture, but actually CTA is part of automation. So when I'll create a separate video for the automation, I'll cover continuous integration testing architecture there, because it's very crucial, and I think this video is taking a bit longer time, so I'll explain it in the further video. If you have any question or concerns or even appreciation, you can send this on inquiry@prolric.com and hit like and share if you like the video, and please put your comment if you think that this video is helpful for you. Thank you very much.